All right, welcome back to the Broken Dealer podcast. I'm your host, Daren Blonski, with my co-host, Carmine Corino here today. We've got a fun one today. We get to talk about common misconceptions about leaving and going independent, right? Lots of people have lots of questions, and it's hard to filter through all the noise that comes at you. But Carmine having left a firm and I having left a firm and helped lots of people leave a firm at this point, have some thoughts on that and stuff we hear on a regular basis when we're talking to people about leaving and becoming an independent advisor. Carmine, number one misconception you hear.
You know, I hear a lot of them, and I'm sure you do as well. We speak to advisors on the weekly, but a lot of the common threads I've heard is, I don't know, one really common one would be, I have no support, kind of on my own, I'm on this island. And these firms do a really good job at packaging advanced planning and this group and this specialist and that specialist, and we'll have these vendors and these wholesalers come and talk to you. They create this environment where you're comfortable, you get all your information from them, and they're kind of the filter. And some people need that kind of environment where they're kind of just part of this big ecosystem. They don't see themselves being responsible for bringing all that information in, but I know how we operate, and I certainly know how you operate. We do a really good job of making sure that our team, no one's on island. In fact, just prior to this call, we had an all hands meeting with all the advisors. And last week we had a mastermind meeting with all the advisors. So it's quite the contrary here. We have a very collaborative environment where advisors are doing a lot of work on their own. And that all happened organically through our multiple meetings a year. So I think that's a really common misconception of, well, I'm kind of, especially with me with the insurance company, they do a great job at kind of packaging you in with all these people and saying, look at all the stuff we do for you. Don't worry about all the requirements we do, but hey, heck, look at all this other stuff we're doing for you. And you can 100% create that collaborative environment on your own. In fact, bolting onto a firm that has that in their culture will save you years of timing of getting to that point. And Daren, I'm sure you've heard this one as well on your end.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a big, at least my experience and many of the other advisors I've talked with over the years, that and firms do a nice job of creating a sense of culture, a sense of community in the brokerage space to keep people in seat, right? That's kind of one of the leverage points they pull on, in addition to always having a dangling carrot out, a quarter out. But the community piece is important, and it's true, if you go out completely on your own and you don't partner with like a firm similar to yours or mine, or have a partner, there is that sense that you are kind of a lone man wolf. Although be it a lot of the brokerage hybrid brokers, that's the sense it is too, right? So I think what the great things about going independent is you get the opportunity to craft and create and be intentional about the culture you want to live in and the people you want to interact with and work around. I think that's one of the real blessings of working in a or at least creating your own versus just working inside somewhere. And every independent firm has a different kind of thing going on, a different kind of cultural piece. And I think, at the end of the day, if you stack them all together, the apples will all be pretty much apples. The difference maker is going to be what's the culture of the organization if you're going to join somebody.
And Daren, I know you and I, the good thing about being good friends with Daren is I'll call him and ask a question. It's never a 2-minute conversation. It goes half. We should actually record those and put that on as a podcast episode because they're pretty funny. But they always go down these rabbit holes of.
That's usually because we're just making fun of you most of the time, Carm.
Pretty much. But I remember this was years ago. We spoke about like culture and the size of the organization and the correlation between the level of culture. So if you have the lone advisor with one staff person, maybe how much culture are you really creating with a smaller firm, right? Nothing wrong with it. Then you go to the big regional BDRAs with 10, 12, 15,000 financial advisors, right? It's hard at that size to create a culture that is collaborative with that many moving pieces and and the bureaucracy of moving the Titanic. Then you have our firms that are considered mid-size, and just about everyone in our mastermind group, right? They've created great cultures with a good amount of advisors, but I think that middle ground of saying, 10 to 200 or 150, somewhere around there, is a really good size where you still have capacity, you have collaboration, and you can create a culture that is very indicative of growth and collaboration and integrity and things like that. When it gets too big, there's too many working parts and too small, there's not enough people. I think that mid-size, for me, if I were looking for a firm, that mid-size would be where I would go. That kind of chunk in the middle.
Yeah, I think you have to ask yourself the question, like how much influence do you want, right? And in fairness, I think there's a spectrum to that. Some people literally just want to plug in, make sure it all works, and then work with clients. And other people want to sit there and write books and envision a future and create something unique. And, that's a different type of firm to associate with. So I think being really clear was one of the first steps on this misconception, is being really clear about, do you want to be an entrepreneur who's an advisor, or do you want to be an advisor who's an advisor, right? Because I think if you just want to be an advisor and that's your goal, which is nothing wrong with that, there's ways to go independent but not have to deal with all the entrepreneurial challenges that come up. I know for myself and working with a firm, it feels at least like 50% of my time goes into just managing operations and human resource issues and all those type of things that take me away from, working with clients and growing my own personal book. I think you have to ask yourself that question and be really honest with yourself, and you'll get a better result if you are.
Very true. Start with why, or find your why. Simon Sinek, it's a great... So when we speak to advisors, a lot of times like, hey, do I bolt on or do I open my own RIA? And that's one of the things I say, look, if you want to spend a majority of your time dealing with the enterprise, then great. Like, you and I have had this conversation before. We're entrepreneurs that happen to be financial advisors, right? But most people, they just want to be advisors to their clients. And if that's the case, bolting on, I believe, is the better option, because it gives you... and I'll speak to misconception number 2 that I wrote down here. One of them is I'll spend all my time on compliance administrative stuff that maybe my firm takes care of. So I know in my environment, compliance runs much like a lot of the BDs, right? So we have an online portal where you submit advertising requests and social media, whatever it is, marketing requests, a blast email, and he approves it. The difference is we have one chief compliance officer and, a amount of advisors where he's getting you an approval same day. And part of our new advisor onboarding process is you have a call with them before, we're in our courting process with a potential new team member. You have a call with our chief compliance officer. And I say, present everything you're doing with him today, and then tell him everything you want to do. The moment you come over, I want you to have complete eyes wide open of what's possible and what you're able to do here on a compliance perspective. And being RA only, we don't have to deal with the issues that FINRA brings when it comes to compliance complexity. On the compliance end, on the administrative side, we have an internal service team that if you opt in, we have a team, 4 people here internally. They handle all the scheduling, all of the pre and post meeting things you would do, all CRM management, onboarding new clients, new financial planning clients, post meeting, ACAT, anything that you would need to do on the daily, you can offload that to our experienced and fantastic administrative team here. Basically sub out your whole back office. So if you're that person that just wants to meet with clients and create impact for families, great. We have the infrastructure for you to do that here. So when I hear that misconception of, wow, I'm going to spend all my time on compliance and administrative stuff that my firm does. No. This is turnkey here. And a lot of firms like mine they do the same thing.
So let's be fair, Carm, because let's push back a little bit on that, right? Because you and I certainly think we have a solution, but I've also heard from advisors that have transitioned and have gone independent, then have unbolted from bolt-ons too. Like, a lot of the independent advisors I know want to run a very slim business where they're like paying maybe 5 to 10 basis points in revenue to a firm to manage all that. And I think what they often find is that that's unrealistic. But there are those that want to do that out there. And so there's a trade-off, right? The trade-off of having a group like Carm or mine do that kind of work for you is you have to give up some of your revenue in order to pay for that. A lot of advisors don't want to pay for it, though. They would rather just bootstrap it. That has worked decently well over the last, I'd say, 30 years. Because there used to be a lot more deference given to smaller firms, one man in a truck kind of shops. But we certainly saw this during the last administration with the SEC, that the regulatory lift and having to stay compliant with all these new fiduciary laws and regulation SP and whatnot, it's become more and more significant in the processes and procedures you have to have in place in order to fulfill your duties as a firm owner. So what I've noticed is there's this whole contingency of advisors who want to do those things and take home 90% of their pay, 95% of their pay, but skimp on all the compliance and other things. And there's a balance there that you've got to walk. And I see a lot of advisors wrestle with that. And there's no cheaper way to do it, I think, than on your own. But what I often see when people just do it on their own is they're grossly incompliant. It's just a matter of time if they get an audit or get a review. And I think that's the trade-off. It's kind of like running around the emperor has no clothes kind of thing. And for some advisors, they're perfectly fine with that kind of risk. I personally am not. And that's why I built infrastructure in my firm and built up what we did to protect clients. But there is a lot of advisors out there that are independent, pay no one to do anything. They are grossly negligent in their duties to the clients. It's just it hasn't got caught yet.
That is a good point. And the way we price our offering, because it's a take it or leave it, right? It's not required, but it's here. We've had enough people raise their hand. In fact, we're hiring 2 more people to the team because we have a lot of people subscribe to this service, is we price it for less than the cost of a VA. So for less of the cost of a part-time VA, you have multiple full-time staff people. And because we have that economies of scale, we can do that. And we're training them, we're housing them, we're doing all this other stuff, and we charge a flat fee per household per year. And that makes it much easier for an advisor to swallow, say, oh, it's going to cost me this. I can't hire somebody for that. Why would I go out and hire somebody? Because they may be great advisors and they want to be business owners. Maybe they're not good leaders. Maybe they're not good at inspiring staff people or building a team. They just, and I have a bunch of them. And when we, let's reference the Who Not How book from Dan Sullivan, Dr. Ben Hardy, a must read for any entrepreneur. If there's administrative work to be done, the argument is like, that's a who problem for an advisor. Advisor shouldn't have to. That's not what you should be working on. You should be eyeball to eyeball with clients, right? That's a who issue. But then take it a step further is that, are you the one that should be hiring and inspiring and training and holding someone accountable and managing people? That's another, could that be a who or how? Do you want to figure out how to do it, or do you need a who? We're a good who with that because we that's what we do with our team already. We make it a really attractive offering on a price because you can't hire someone to what it's going to cost to hand it off. But there's always going to be those advisors that have scarcity mentality. That nope, paying anything is less profit. They don't see beyond like, hey, if I'm not doing this, I can grow much faster. In fact, I know I brought this up before to our group, where we now have white papers done for the advisors who followed my system of segmenting their clients, eliminating a lot of things that are not in line with their core vision, onboarding with our service team. And so far of the, one that is done, we did a 12-month before, 12-month after data of revenue, assets, households, and hours worked per week. The first one just timed out. He more than doubled his revenue, working 8 hours a week less and having the same amount of households. And this is all the power of elimination. That elimination to me is more important than adding stuff when it comes to growth. And he did a very great job at eliminating a lot of things. And we now have the proof. I can say till I'm blue in the face, our system works. But now we have three. By the end of June, we'll have the other three advisors all timed out, and very similar stories of growth with a very little amount of investment needed. It's more of mentally getting out of that scarcity mode and letting things go that you thought were important, and peppered in with the who, not how. Like, I should not be doing this. I need a who. And you're talking about working less, same amount of households, and this one example, more than double his revenue in 12 months. So we have really good data now to show that the impact of elimination and finding a lot of who's in your life, which I know you're a firm believer in it as well.
Yeah, I think, I was talking with some advisors recently, and they've grown a substantial book, and we were having a talk about eliminating and the power of eliminating. And I think sometimes that eliminating doesn't always mean eliminating cost. And that's what allows you to grow, is that you're eliminating things to do. You're finding your who's that help you scale. And if you really want to scale as an advisor, that's what you have to do. You have to find a way to eliminate it and create economies of scale, because you only have 24 hours in a day. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of advisors forget that, especially the ones that are really trying to always minimize cost. And minimizing cost becomes their God. And what they don't realize is that down the end of that road comes scarcity, and that scarcity will affect your growth eventually.
Yeah, and scarcity mentality is the difference between, so we just hired a communications company to come in and speak about communications to our team, and we had some open licenses that we can then pass down to the advisors. And the two advisors here this morning, this happened. I said, hey, I signed you up for communications training. It's going to cost X amount of dollars. Like, all right, got it. No problem. Right. One of the two had a scarcity mentality problem years ago. And over time, I taught him, like, this is not a cost. This is an investment. If you are able to communicate better to a prospect, identifying what style I don't know. I don't even know the crux of their training, but it's one of the highest rated communications companies in the country that train C-level executives at all these big corporations. All I know is for this meager investment, which is hundreds of dollars, if you can get one client to say yes based on the way your level of communication is, that's an investment. It's not a cost. But it took me years to kind of flip his thinking around, oh, what does it cost? That was always his first question. Now it's just like, I'm in. Whatever it is, I don't care. Because it's an investment in yourself. And if you can make yourself a little bit better, you're going to get better outcomes. And I know that's the life you and I live, is that we're almost addicted to this. The next thing we can learn. I'm doing a speed reading and retention course now. So I do that on the weekends, right? Because it's going to make me a better reader. Now, okay, I'm going to be a better reader. I'm going to retain more information from these great books I'm reading. So make me a better human.
I hope they give you a guarantee on that. That's a pretty heavy lift for you, Carm.
Why? What do you mean?
Well, I mean, a speed reading course that you could actually get more from your reading. I mean, that's pretty tough for you. I mean, there's only so much you can do with the software. The hardware is what the hardware is, bro.
Listen, they didn't give me money back guarantee after they talked to me, so maybe that's why they kind of pulled that from me. We'll see. I'll let you know. Okay. But it's those little investments of, I call it being a better human. And if I'm able to retain,
our mutual coach always says to us is like, hey, you should be investing 10% of your revenue each year back into your development and growth as a person.
Oh yeah.
And I took that to heart many years ago when I started working with him, and it's definitely paid off for me. Sometimes hard to write those checks, but what that's brought into my life and the richness of growth and opportunity and mindset shifts has been hugely valuable for my development as a professional. All right. So third misconception, we got two. What's the third one, Carm?
The third one I came up with that I've heard, and it's going to be too complicated to operate and maintain. So I think this misconception is around like, hey, my firm gives me this tech stack. I use this custodian. They give me this CRM. I don't have to make decisions around any of these things. I don't need to maintain it. It's too complicated to go out and look at software. What investment strategy? So this is all the things that these bigger firms do to make us feel comfortable. I was subject to it, and I know you were as well. Like, wow, I get this packaged product. I don't need to worry about any of these things. It's all taken care of. But when you start educating yourself, like, oh, this is serum they gave us, but heck, I saw a demo on this one. It looks fantastic. Or I want to be able to do recurring financial planning fees out of a client's checking account. I can't do that. Oh, but this tech does it. So knowing, I think the first step is knowing what's possible outside of what your firm, that box your firm gives you of the tech, your tech box. And saying, okay, there's other things out there. This might be worth it. Or bolting onto a firm like ours, the tech stack is a box. The difference of our box is our guidelines that we use, compliance and for tech, is not set to the lowest common denominator. We're not using the simplest version because we have 15,000 advisors. Now, we talk about these large BDRAs that have these really strict compliance constraints, but they have to. If you or I owned one of these, we would do the same thing because we can't let the person, there's so many people coming on board, we can't let the person just got hired have the same capabilities as a 30-year veteran. So when you're in those bigger environments, it's like, oh, well, it's the who's the least qualified. That's where we set the bar to, and everyone's got to conform to it. Where because we're that middle size, we have the flexibility to allow all these different pieces of technology and all these capabilities that the larger firms don't. But in our cases, with our firms, an advisor comes on board. Here's your tech stack. Here's how you plug in. We'll have you up and running in a day. Here's how all these things work. You can use it or not use it. It's up to you. But I think I could talk about you and I, we've done a really good job at providing the highest end tech stack and constantly evolving and changing. We just added a couple new ones in the last couple months. And going back to kind of the collaboration part here is when an advisor wants a new piece of tech approved, the first step is you got to present it to me. And why, how does it benefit the client? And how does it benefit you as an advisor? And is there a risk to the enterprise, right? So the first two is usually pretty easy to show. And the third one is it's a call with our internal tech person and that technology to see, what their security is and things like that. But most of the tech that we have was brought to us by our advisors. And that's an open door.
It's interesting. So when I went independent in 2016, we could just pretty much set up any piece of tech, like the fintech world. Like Kitces does this really cool breakdown of all the technology available
that
for
map, that big map thing that he does.
That big map he does.
Yeah.
And that map has exponentially grown in the last, say, 3-4 years. Like it used to be so much smaller. And, we used to be able to just add tech and it wasn't that big a deal. But I will say, and where the assumption is right, there's a lot of complexity to it. And this is why sometimes it makes sense to partner with a firm versus set your own. You can't just add tech without doing your cybersecurity reviews of the tech. Are these SOC Gen approved? There's so much cybersecurity stuff now that firms have to deal with. It's changed infinitely in the amount of work that needs to be done. I would say that is one area that's really difficult. And that tech spend has gone through the roof, at least for our firm. I'm sure it has for you.
Yep.
You just can't add stuff anymore because of that. And you have to do a due diligence process. So like with our firm, when our advisors want to add tech, there has to be this process that we go through of like, we need to make sure it's approved. We need to make sure it's going to work, blah, 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 all this stuff, and that it fits different cybersecurity protocols. So I think there is some truth to that misconception. It is more work. And I would say the biggest downside to going independent is that now you have all this technology that you're reliant upon APIs to communicate, and you're reliant upon programming and tools to create efficiency. Whereas there is some benefit just being able to walk into the big brokerage, sit down in the chair, log in and go. Like there's some advantages to that. But you pay dearly for it, right? Because you're paying 40, 50, 60% of your revenue for that opportunity to sit down and not have to think about it. And there's ways to do that independent where you're paying less of your revenue, but you're still, for the most part, able to sit down and go after it. All right. So 3 misconceptions. Run them back through again one more time, Carmine. So we got our first misconception is
the no support. I'll be on my own island, right? That's number one.
And that can be true, but you get the chance to create your own culture as you're independent. And there's lots of groups out there that you can build community with that construct and create that community for you. Misconception number 2.
I'll spend all of my time on compliance administrative functions.
Sort of true if you do it all on your own. Not true if you partner with a group. Misconception number 3.
It's going to be too complicated to operate and maintain. So in regards to tech.
In regards to tech, true-ish. Again, relying on a partner. And what you and I have spent a lot of time studying is this whole 10X idea. How do you grow your firm 10X? And elimination of things that you're not the best at is one of the best ways you can grow. And it's kind of counterintuitive. I think a lot of advisors get desperate over that next dollar they're going to earn. And then they try to pinch the penny. And in the end, they end up not growing and they get really disappointed and they create exactly what they don't want. Well, anyway, we're going to leave it there for this episode of the Broken Dealer podcast. Hopefully that was helpful, give you some insight as you think about your journey to going independent.
Thank you for listening to Broken Dealer. Click the follow button to be notified when new episodes become available. Visit our website at www.brokendealer.com. The information covered and posted represents the views and opinions of the guest and does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of Carmine Corino and Daren Blonski. The content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only. The content is not intended to be a substitute for professional investing advice. Always seek the advice of your financial advisor or other qualified financial service provider with any questions you may have regarding your investment planning. Fermata Advisors, LLC, DBA Sonoma Wealth Advisors, LLC, and Cornerstone Planning Group are both independent registered investment advisors and are non-affiliated entities. The opinions expressed by Daren Blonski and Carmine Corino on this show are their own and do not reflect the opinions of Sonoma Wealth Advisors, LLC, and Cornerstone Planning Group. All statements and opinions expressed are based upon information considered reliable, although it should not be relied upon as such. Any statements or opinions are subject to change without notice. The information presented is for educational purposes only and is not intended to make an offer or solicitation for the sale or purchase of any specific securities, investments, or investment strategies. Investments involve risk and, unless otherwise stated, are not guaranteed. Information expressed does not take into account your specific situation or objectives and is not intended as recommendations appropriate for any individual. Listeners are encouraged to seek advice from a qualified tax, legal, or investment advisor to determine whether any information presented may be suitable for their specific situation. Past performance is not indicative of future performance.